Peter Thiel was born in Germany in 1967, and if you were writing a screenplay about a tech billionaire with shadowy connections, you would probably dial back the details because they seem too on the nose. He was educated at Stanford, co-founded PayPal, and when that company sold to eBay for $1.5 billion, he walked away with the kind of money that lets you do whatever you want for the rest of your life. What he wanted to do was buy a 10% stake in a little website called Facebook for $500,000. That investment alone made him one of the wealthiest people on the planet. As of 2025, his net worth sits at roughly $27.5 billion. Here is where things get strange. Thiel has been described in completely serious publications as perhaps America's leading public intellectual. Another profile called him the intellectual architect of Silicon Valley's contemporary ethos. If you saw those phrases in a conspiracy theory, you would dismiss them immediately. They sound like something a paranoid blogger would invent after their third coffee. But these are real quotes from real journalists trying to make sense of a man who seems to exist one step ahead of everyone, trying to figure him out. His trajectory reads like someone connected the dots before anyone else knew there were dots to connect, from the PayPal mafia to the chairman of Palantir, a company named after seeing stones in Lord of the Rings that let you spy on your enemies, to advising a president who ran against the very establishment Thiel helped build. You could not write this character. Fiction demands plausibility. Reality, apparently, does not. Peter Thiel really loves Lord of the Rings, and when I say loves, I mean he has structured his entire business empire around J.R.R. Tolkien's fantasy mythology. Most tech billionaires name their companies something forgettable with dropped vowels or misspelled words. Thiel went a different direction entirely. He built a corporate taxonomy drawn straight from Middle-earth. Palantir Technologies, founded in 2004, and now valued at around $20 billion, takes its name from the seeing stones of Tolkien's world. These magical orbs let users observe distant events and communicate across vast distances. Thiel's version uses data analytics instead of magic, helping governments and police departments find patterns in information. The US Army uses it, the LAPD uses it, and just like in the books where reckless use of a seeing stone can endanger an entire civilization, Palantir has raised significant ethical concerns about surveillance and privacy. The parallel seems to have escaped everyone involved. Valor Ventures was registered in New Zealand in 2009, deliberately positioned near Peter Jackson's filming locations. Thiel even obtained New Zealand citizenship because apparently when you are worth billions, you can just collect passports like trading cards. The Valor in Tolkien's mythology are powerful spirits who shaped the world itself. Modest naming choice for a venture capital firm. Mithril Capital Management, founded in 2012, takes its name from the legendary elven armor that protects while remaining impossibly light. Rivendell One LLC served as a holding company for Facebook shares, named after the elven outpost where the Fellowship gathered before their journey, and Lembas LLC, named after the elvish bread that sustained travelers, existed primarily to feed Thiel's bank account through Facebook trades. What emerges from this naming system is genuinely revealing. Each company corresponds to a specific magical enhancement: seeing stones for vision, armor for protection, bread for sustenance, sanctuaries for gathering resources. Thiel seems to view technology as a form of modern enchantment tools that extend human capability beyond natural limits. In Lord of the Rings, the Palantiri were created for good, before being corrupted by Sauron, but surely a surveillance company named after one would never suffer a similar fate. Here is a fascinating question for anyone paying attention to Peter Thiel's business empire. What kind of founder names his surveillance company after an object that literally corrupts everyone who uses it? The Palantir in Tolkien's universe are not neutral tools, they are seeing stones that grant tremendous power to observe distant events and communicate across vast distances. But they come with a rather significant catch: every single character who uses one extensively ends up corrupted, manipulated, or destroyed by the experience. The most tragic example is Saruman, the wizard who starts as a wise and noble figure. He obtains a Palantir and begins using it to surveil his enemies, convinced he can outsmart the Dark Lord Sauron through superior intelligence gathering. Instead, Sauron turns the tables completely. The Dark Lord uses the very same seeing stone to twist Saruman's mind, feeding him selective information and manipulating him into becoming an unwitting servant of evil. Tolkien scholar Jane Chance-Nitz described Saruman as seeking godlike knowledge. By gazing in a short-sighted way, he thought he was gathering intelligence on his enemies. He was actually being turned into one now. Consider what Palantir Technologies actually does in the real world. The company builds surveillance and data analytics systems for the United States Army, for police departments in major American cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, and New Orleans, and for immigration and customs enforcement. These are organizations with tremendous power to monitor, detain, and control people's lives. The ethical concerns raised by civil liberties advocates sound remarkably similar to the warnings embedded in Tolkien's fiction. What happens when you give a small group of people the ability to see everything about everyone? Do they become wiser and more just, or do they become something else entirely? There is another uncomfortable parallel in Tolkien's story. Saruman believes he can use the power of the Seeing Stone for good while remaining uncorrupted by it. He is wrong. And here is an interesting detail about Palantir. The company, according to its own S-1 filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the business has never turned a profit. Perhaps that is fitting for a company named after an object that promises unlimited knowledge, but delivers only corruption and ruin to those who gaze into it. Here is something genuinely puzzling about Peter Thiel's political philosophy. He has been described as both a conservative libertarian and a democracy skeptic authoritarian, which sounds like a contradiction wrapped in a paradox. Yet he has poured substantial donations into American right-wing figures and causes, which seems like an odd hobby for someone who questions whether democracy should exist at all. Then there is the Gawker situation in 2016. Thiel confirmed that he had secretly funded the lawsuit that destroyed Gawker Media. The case involved Hulk Hogan suing the outlet for publishing a sex tape. But Thiel's motivation was personal. Gawker had previously outed him as gay, and he apparently spent years quietly bankrolling litigation to bring the company down. It worked. A billionaire using his wealth to silence a media organization is the kind of story that usually gets labeled a conspiracy theory, until it turns out to be completely true. Thiel also served as an advisor to Donald Trump, which placed him squarely inside the Democratic machinery he supposedly questions. And this is where the irony becomes almost theatrical. If you genuinely believe democracy is a failed experiment, why spend millions influencing its outcomes? Why accept a position advising a democratically elected president? The most generous reading is that Thiel wants to reform a broken system from within. The less generous reading is that he has found democracy quite profitable and intends to keep it that way. Skepticism notwithstanding, his entire empire rests on government contracts, public markets, and political influence gained through democratic processes. It is like watching someone complain about the restaurant's cooking while ordering seconds. Thiel questions democracy's legitimacy while exploiting every advantage it offers, and somewhere in that contradiction lies the real philosophy. Here is something that sounds like it was pulled from a conspiracy forum written by someone wearing a tinfoil hat, except it actually happened in 2026. The House Oversight Committee released a batch of emails that most major news outlets somehow failed to cover with the intensity they deserved. These emails revealed that Valor Ventures, one of Thiel's investment firms, accepted $40 million from Jeffrey Epstein. That is not a typo, $40 million, and the correspondence between Thiel and Epstein spanned 5 years, ending only when Epstein died in his jail cell. They discussed Brexit among other topics, just two billionaires chatting about geopolitical restructuring. Nothing to see there. The timing is worth noting. Thiel obtained New Zealand citizenship in 2011 through a process that New Zealand officials later admitted was, shall we say, expedited. He had never actually lived there. He visited exactly 4 times. But somehow he qualified for citizenship under a special category, typically reserved for people who make substantial investments or bring exceptional skills to the country. Within years, he had purchased hundreds of acres of remote land and began constructing what locals started calling his apocalypse bunker. The property sits near Lake Wanaka, surrounded by mountains, accessible only through a narrow winding road, a perfect place to wait out the collapse of civilization. The holding company for this property was called Rivendell I in Tolkien's mythology. Rivendell is the elven sanctuary where the Fellowship regroups before facing the darkness. A place of safety hidden in a valley, protected by magic and wisdom. Thiel apparently thought naming his escape hatch after a fictional refuge was a clever nod to his favorite fantasy series, and honestly, at this point, why not? If you are going to build a doomsday retreat on the other side of the world, from where you actually live, you might as well give it a whimsical name. What makes this also strange is the pattern when you string these facts together: the Epstein money, the New Zealand citizenship, the apocalypse bunker, the Tolkien naming conventions. It sounds like the plot of a movie that would be criticized for being too implausible. A tech billionaire with documented connections to a convicted sex offender builds a remote sanctuary named after a fictional elven stronghold, while corresponding with said sex offender about European politics. That is not a conspiracy theory, that is just the news reported by mainstream outlets, confirmed by government documents. The conspiracy theorists got outplayed by reality. They were not paranoid enough. So here is where the whole thing becomes genuinely funny in a dark, uncomfortable way. Conspiracy theorists have spent decades constructing elaborate theories about shadowy figures who meet in secret locations to orchestrate global surveillance and manipulate governments. They imagine hidden hands pulling strings from smoke-filled rooms. They picture mysterious cabals operating through cryptic symbols and ancient rituals, and the entire time, Peter Thiel has been right there in plain sight, doing essentially what they fear. But completely openly, the man builds a surveillance empire that tracks individuals for law enforcement agencies across America. He questions whether democracy is even compatible with freedom. He associates with convicted sex offenders and builds doomsday compounds on the other side of the world. Every single thing that conspiracy theorists imagine the New World Order might do, Thiel has essentially done, but instead of hiding it, he named his company after a magical seeing stone from a children's fantasy novel. He gave interviews about his philosophy, he filed public S-1 documents with the Securities and Exchange Commission, he accepted a presidential appointment, and stood on stages discussing his worldview. The conspiracy theorists are looking for secret symbols and hidden messages, completely missing the fact that the actual surveillance state is trademarked and incorporated in Delaware. The hidden hand they fear signed paperwork in triplicate, and announced itself with a Lord of the Rings reference. There is something almost beautiful about the absurdity. The ultimate conspiracy is not hidden in any meaningful sense. It filed for an initial public offering and trades on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol PLTR.